Hi everyone, my name is Courtney and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be doing my second deep dive into the Goodreads challenges. So if you don't know, Goodreads is a website where you can track your reading, where you can write reviews and see other people's reading. It is a very old dinosaur website, and over the past year and a half, it has been getting some cosmetic updates, but it is very much an interesting website because it doesn't seem like, for its viewership, it doesn't get a lot of updates or love, especially because the website is owned by Amazon. Amazon, of course, is the corporation, is all about fast shipping and just having every single thing that you could possibly want in your entire life, but it is a site that started out as books. As Amazon expanded into other sectors, Amazon has made their books very cheap and kind of taken the hit financially on selling books at a cheaper rate to keep people on the Amazon website. So Amazon has always been connected to books. They bought out Goodreads, they own Goodreads, and Amazon also owns Audible, they own Kindle. They very much want to stay connected to readership, the idea of reading and books, and Amazon is always trying to find a way to put a leg up on getting books from other sites. If you don't know, recently, I don't know if it was National or International Indie Book Pub Day, they also had like a big Kindle event, a big book discount deal day, so that people would shop on Amazon instead of shopping at their local indie bookstore. Getting out of the whole Amazon thing, since Goodreads has been around, at least since I've been using it, which is 2015, Goodreads has had their annual book challenge where basically you set out to read so many books in the year and you get a little banner if you win it. But recently, I want to say September, November of last year, they started implementing these new challenges that are a little bit different. They're not just how many books did you set out to read, did you read them? Now they're like specific challenges with specific books. And those challenges are important because those challenges were originally on Kindle, they're being brought over, and now this is the third challenge that they've had. So they had a set of challenges at the 2024 year. I would say that was probably testing ground for these challenges, and then we had our first like official Goodreads challenges from January to April. I did an entire video discussing those challenges. Basically, I was just like, this is really weird, what are these? And so I decided to research them and look into them and dissect them to really get into what these are all about. And so now we are going into our second reading challenges of the year for Goodreads, and these are called Goodreads Seasonal Challenges, and they are set from May 1st to June 30th. So these are very different from the last challenges because there's only a 2-month time period in which to complete them, so they are just very different than what we saw in the last round of challenges, which again got me thinking that this is so interesting because I had my qualms with the first challenge. I thought they were interesting because they were trying to be like this united front almost of challenges that seem similar to each other, but there was a lot of inconsistency with the data, how it was pulled, how it was made, but they were all similarly themed. Whereas when you go into these challenges, it just seems a lot more haphazardous. So how these challenges kind of go together with each other is very interesting to me. Any of the kind of cohesion that was kind of put up in the last challenges is kind of thrown out the window. So in the last round, we had challenges based on a theme for the month, African American Reads for Black History Month, or we got genre. So the top historical fiction, the top romantasy, whatever it may be. So this challenge, we did not get any genre-based challenges, which I was very confused by. I thought every new set of challenges that we got, we were going to get the new genre. I thought these challenges would be segmented 4 months, 4 months, 4 months. I thought that each challenge we would get one that is based off of a history month, whether that be Indigenous History Month, Pride Month, whatever it may be. And I thought we would get the genre challenges so that at the end of the year, you would know what are the popular books from each genre and so forth, which is really interesting to me because this is seasonal. So what are the seasons here? To me, this feels more like an in-between moment between winter and summer. And I think it's going to be interesting because I think we're going to get seasonal challenges for next month that are going to be very summer focused. So like, what is seasonal here if it's not really to a particular season? And so like last month, what I'm thinking about when I'm looking at these challenges is, what are they trying to market to us? Is it just Amazon marketing Kindle to us? Is it just marketing the idea of buying books from them? I don't necessarily think so. I think Goodreads is a very big stronghold for Amazon, no matter how much work they actually put into the site. I think Goodreads is kind of this very interesting website. It's trying to market themselves as literary. And what I mean by that is it's a site that tries to promote itself as literary, very literacy forward, very intelligent. It's trying to promote itself as very concerned about what's going on in the world. Goodreads is trying to promote itself, I don't want to say as woke because we don't need to get into that, but it's trying to promote itself as somebody that reads diversely. It's trying to promote itself as a site where readers value books across expressions and different people. And like maybe the workers at Goodreads are these kind of people. At the end of the day, it's the corporation that's trying to promote this image of itself as in tune with what readers are reading and also in tune with being interested in diversity, interested in promoting works from different authors, whether that be queer books, books by BIPOC creators, whatever it may be. So before we get into the challenges themselves, let's kind of recap what we found from last time. Goodreads is a product. It's Amazon trying to sell us books. It's Amazon trying to sell us buying books for their Kindle, but it might be something more than that. It's Amazon trying to sell their own image. We also know from this point that while they're saying that their lists are based on data, that is a little misconstrued because there are factors that make the data biased in some ways. People are making decisions with how they curate these lists, and they are impacting how the lists look. There's also a problem because it uses the Amazon shopping algorithm. So a book can be categorized as fantasy, literary fiction, sci-fi, whatever it may be. So when it's put into a section of most popular fantasy novels, when it's actually literary fiction, there's some problems there. So while people are impacting this list, making decisions about it, there's not always consistency here. There's not always things that could be considered a clear objective with the choices that are being made. And the other big thing that we need to think about is that these stats, they're coming from Goodreads, which is a biased source in itself. It is an American-based website run by Americans and used by Americans, and there is definitely a skew towards white female readers, white female authors, and of course English-speaking people. And so besides that data being skewed towards a very specific demographic, Goodreads itself has problems with its BIPOC and queer authors getting hate bombed, getting review bombed, whether that be something that is done consciously by the person going out searching for people to review bomb, or whether it's readers just doing that subconsciously based on their own biases. One of the things I was really looking at was the diversity that was included in their lists, kind of thinking about who created these, why they created them, which really gave me the idea that Amazon may be doing this more as like a checklist versus actually doing it, caring about these things in literature. The content creators, the blogists themselves might personally care about these things, but the reason why they're being put on the platform, why they're being platformed by Amazon, by Goodreads, is probably something more to do with marketing, with how Goodreads is trying to present itself. One of the ways that I kind of came to this idea, I was really looking at one of Cindy's latest videos from With Cindy, used to be Reads with Cindy. I love her content, but she made a video discussing empathy and why we can't look to books as a source to create empathy or to curate empathy within ourselves. It's a really eloquently said video, and I highly recommend watching that because it was something I was really struggling with in my previous video, because I am someone that wants to read diversely, but it's also like I never want to see it as a checklist. I never want to see it as something that I'm just trying to do to present myself, as a good person. And it's like reading books, building my empathy doesn't really matter if I'm not actually like going out and doing stuff, and it shouldn't be a way to acknowledge or see someone as doing good if they're just reading queer books, just reading BIPOC books and not actually doing the work in their communities. So that's why for this video, I really wanted to pivot away from why these lists need diversity and think about more of it from a marketing perspective of like why these lists include diversity at all and why Goodreads is going out of their way to include these lists for Black History Month, these lists for Pride Month, and what they're trying to sell us when they create those lists, especially because there's inconsistency there. There's these lists that are cured towards diversity, but then there's these regular lists, the general fiction lists that are not including diversity. Like, what does that say about readers? What does that say about Amazon's marketing? As far as marketing goes, I think it proves that Amazon is just doing it as a checklist, because again, we've already discussed that this data is skewed. It is biased, and when we see that general fiction lists only include one BIPOC author, a lot of times it is the readers, but it's also something more. It's publishing not creating the spaces for these authors to get published. It's society making it difficult for people that are not supportive supported to become authors. It's the publishing world not having BIPOC and diverse people in their marketing departments, in their editorial departments. It's a slew of problems that is reflected by Amazon, that is reflected in these stats, but isn't the all and be all. There's so many factors that are making this data, which is why I'm interested in it, because it's saying a lot, not just about our Goodreads readers, it's saying a lot about the marketing of Goodreads, about the marketing of books, about the publishing industry, and we're on the front end of this. We're not looking at the back end of this. I can't know everything. This is all surmising from me, so I'm just gonna show you the data this time around and we can just kind of think about it. Let's get into these challenges. There were 7 challenges this time around. The first 3 were kind of throwaway challenges. There was Page Turner, which was to read 2 books, Speed Reader, which was to read 3 books, and then Book Boss, which was to read 4 books. So those don't really count. Those were kind of disappointing to me because it didn't give me anything interesting to look at, but we do have 4 themed reading challenges. We have Centennial Picks, which was popular books from over the last 100 years. We have Heritage Reads, which was AAPI titles, how they phrased it, AAPI. I know that this acronym has now since been changed to AANHPI, which is Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander, but they phrased it as AAPI, which is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage. And then we have Armchair Explorer, which was books themed around summer travel. And then of course we have Rainbow Reads, which was for Pride Month, which was all about LGBTQ reads. For these challenges, I did not pull any data from Armchair Explorer. This challenge was based all around the theme of travel, and it was very, very cute. I highly recommend looking at the article. It's very interesting. Basically, the idea was that you were doing your own choose adventure kind of a deal, and you could read a book about a plane, book about a train, book about going to a cabin, all these different things. It didn't quite work for me because I felt like it should have been multi-book. So like you should have picked your mode of transportation, picked where you're going, picked this. I ended up reading Here You Go Again, and I believe this was like road trip themed. So like overall, I didn't want to look at that data because it was just a cute theme without any kind of substance or connectivity to anything else that they have done so far. So to me, the data didn't really matter. But I still have 3 challenges that I did do a lot of looking into. So we are going to actually go backwards for this, and we are going to discuss the Rainbow Reads books first. So, Rainbow Reads is obviously the challenge that was set out for Pride Month, the achievement you collect when you read a LGBTQ plus book. Our article is written by Sybil, and it's called Read the Rainbow, 135 New LGBTQ plus Books to Celebrate Pride. Interesting thing that I noticed for this article is I scrolled down to see if there were any comments. Comments have been eliminated, and I think all comments have been taken off for all news and interview articles, at least from my digging around. So that's very interesting that Goodreads decided to disable comments on their news interview pages. So let's read the article. Happy Pride Month, fellow Goodreadsers. To mark this annual celebration, we've gathered together a collection of brand new LGBTQ plus fiction, nonfiction, and YA books. All the titles here are fresh, published in the US from the beginning of January through early June of this year. There's a lot to love, as you will quickly see. A new novel from acclaimed author Ocean Vogue is, of course, always an event, as is a new romance by Jasmine Gilmore, but we've also got extremely buzzy debut novels, candid athlete memoirs, generous speculative fiction anthologies, Dutch Gothic horror, and medieval YA romantasy, and some contemporary fiction featuring comas and sushi, plus a truly fascinating scientific inquiry concerning, and we quote, the abounding queerness of nature. Scroll around through the options below and click on the cover art images for more details about each book. If you find any interesting leads for your future reading plans, use the Want to Read button to sort books to your digital shelf. In itself, I think these challenges, this new round of challenges is very interesting because for both the AAPI and for the Pride Month, they have fiction, nonfiction, and young adult all separated. And this was something that we did not see last time around. So it seems like it's something new that they're implementing. This is also interesting because it's all new releases. It's only stuff that's been released this year. And I think it's interesting also because at the end of this article, as well as embedded in this article, there is like a call to action to be using this feature, as well as a call to action to be doing this challenge. Was interested in the stats of this, obviously, to break down, but the thing that really intrigued me was there are 135 new books, but those are not all the queer books that were released as far as my knowledge goes. There's definitely many, many more books that were released this year that are queer, so how was each one decided? And so I decided that's what I wanted to figure out for this challenge. Figure out which books were included and why. So I used January as a guide because it is a a prominent month for book releases, so I knew I would get enough data, but I also was like, if I use one month, we can kind of guess that it is reflective for the rest of the months. So for this data, I went to Goodreads and went to their new releases section, and every season they tell you the top 200 books that are releasing per month, and I went through that, combed through that, and figured out how many of those releases for January were queer. So per Goodreads data, there were 19 queer releases, and that I could find 9 of those 19 were included in the Pride Month challenge. And from what I could find, there was no really rhyme or reason as to why 9 of those were included versus the other 11 that weren't, but I knew that wasn't all there was. So I went to my favorite bloggist that discusses new releases, which is Eloise Brad Books on Instagram, and went to their post to see how many releases they discussed were released in January. Their blog had 56 books that were coming out for January that were queer, and so from my counting, 47 of those books did not make the cut to be included in the top 200 books that were releasing that month. And from my count, there were 5 books that did not make Goodreads' new release page, but were included in 135 challenge post. So there were 43 books that came out in January that were not included at all in the 135 challenge. So let's just go through January releases so we can kind of get a picture. Those 19 books that were included on the top 200 books, it's fascinating to see which ones were included and which ones weren't. So we have The 3 Lives of Kate K. That was the 12th most popular book for January. It is included on the Goodreads list, and it almost has 48,000 reviews or reads on Goodreads, whereas Lightfall was not included, and it only has over 1,000 reads despite being the 35th most popular book for that month to release. The Lamb has 10,000 reads and was number 42 on the list, but did not make the Goodreads page. But Good Girl, which has a little bit over 4,000 reads and number 52 on the list, did make it. We Could Be Rats made the Goodreads list. The Four Ruined Realms did not, and both of them have very similar readership at almost 10,000. It's interesting here because some of them seem to be based off of popularity, but some of them aren't. So why were books chosen for this list? Why were they not chosen? A little bit of it is popularity. A lot of it isn't. It doesn't seem like it's based off of the top releases of every month. It's not based off of that data. What I'm assuming happens, I don't know how the Goodreads system works on the back end, but I would assume what happens is you can basically somehow algorithmically be like, okay, I want the books that were released from January to July, and I want a list of all of the books that include the tag LGBT, queer, whatever it is. Maybe they're only doing books with the tag LGBT, so anything that was tagged just sapphic or just queer isn't getting included. And so then someone is going through and picking which books, I don't know. Interesting. Data is interesting. So let's get into the heritage reads. You collect this achievement when you complete one of the fascinating titles by AAPI and Asian authors. So let's take a look at this article, which was made by Sharon, and it goes, it's May in the US, and that means it's Asian Pacific Island Heritage Month, dedicated to celebrating the culture, history, and contributions of those with Asian, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Island backgrounds. This year, in honor of the month-long celebration, we've compiled a collection of new adult fiction, nonfiction, and young adult fiction from authors of Asian and Pacific Islander heritage, published in the US since the beginning of 2024 through the end of May 2025. Of course, given the size of API diaspora across the globe, this is by no means a comprehensive list, but it should offer you plenty of great books to add to your year-round what-to-read shelf. Some highlights: acclaimed poet and novelist Ocean Vuong returned to the fiction well this month with a big-hearted novel about chosen family. Manaka Yamamoto offers up a sci-fi heist/love letter to Hawaii in Hamajang Luck. In the YA space, Randy Wrigley's National Book Award nominated Everything We Ever Had follows 4 generations of Filipino-American boys and nonfiction authors ponder big topics: how to tell when we will die and how a girl like me falls for a cult like that. Click on the book's cover image for more information about each title and use Want to Read button to add to your digital shelf. So again, we see the split between fiction, nonfiction, young adult, and this is 189 books versus our 135. So again, there's no consistency with the amount of books that are are being picked, but I think it's interesting because it's very similarly formatted now, and I think it's interesting that it's also a similar format with the dates. These are all new 2024 releases. So this is the one spreadsheet that I did break down into different categories, where I looked at the author, looked at the genre, looked at the country of origin, looked at nationality, just because I wanted to see how it was broken up. I also categorized when books had a translator attached to them. So of our 189 books, there were 15 books that were translated books. I think there were an author or two that had multiple books, but for the most part, not really. But if we look at genre, it is pretty evenly split between a bunch of different genres. We have fiction, speculative, horror, sci-fi, fantasy, romance, nonfiction, YA, SFF, young adult fiction, historical fiction, and mystery thriller. So nonfiction and fiction are our biggest categories, but there is a pretty even split with about 5 to 9% for each subcategory. And so then we get into ethnicity, where I just looked at all the countries that these authors claim heritage from, and the colors are broken down to show who are East Asian with the light blue, who are Southeast Asian with any of the dark blue colors. I didn't do the same colors just to kind of break it up because it just kind of looked weird, but it kind of gives you a feel between East Asian and South Asian. There is pretty even split between those different groups. There were a lot of countries represented, but not every country, but I'm assuming that's more to do with not there not being authors in those places, but maybe it being more difficult to get into the American market, whereas Japan, Korea, China has a lot of authors exporting their work, getting their works translated. There's already a system in place to do that. Or places like Singapore, Taiwan, even Thailand, Malaysia, where those people learn English, know English, and are able to write books in English, and thus able to market themselves or get themselves published by an American or British or Canadian company. The only thing here is that there's not a ton of people from our Pacific Islands. We have one Maori, we have one person from Guam, and we have one person that is Hawaiian. So that is something that I think people in those groups have spoken out about, that they need more publishing, that we're not seeing those people being published. And I don't think it's a coincidence that those groups of Pacific Islanders are also very much connected to indigenous communities, and that's why they're not seeing a lot of representation. But let's go to nationality. I broke it up with the blue and green to show which people were born in a Western or English speaking country, and majority still live, but some of them have immigrated to the US, Canada, whatever, but were born in a non-Western, non-English speaking country. 54% are US, and then a sprinkling of Canadian, Australian, British, and then one Swedish, I believe. But for the most part, there are a lot of people that are living in, that have been raised in, were born in their country of origin, and are writing books and producing books and selling books in those countries. But it is a very big difference from a lot of the lists that we have seen so far. So if you're looking for books where the author is not based in an English-speaking country, if you're looking for translated works, this list is your best bet because you're gonna find a lot of that here. So we have our LGBT list, and we have our Asian Pacific Island Heritage Month. So both of these lists are based off of a month that is dedicated to celebrating a specific group of people. What I really want to know is the percentage of Goodreads people that complete challenges like the romance category versus people who complete the challenges like these that are based on diversity, because even if it's a check mark kind of achievement, I wonder if people are even going out of their way to do that one little thing. For me, I picked up a book that I have been interested in for a while, which is a Banh Mi for Two, which is a young adult book about two girls in Vietnam, and I really enjoyed it and glad I had the opportunity to read it. But there's still a lot of stuff on this list that I'm really interested in, and so I need to make sure that I go back and peruse this list and use it as a resource if I want to use this as a resource. Otherwise, going to my own reading list and actually picking up the AAPI books that I have checked as something that I'm interested in. Last time I would have questioned, is the Pride Month, is the API list a good resource? So I want to think less about that. What are they trying to market to us with these? I think they are trying to market themselves as a corporation that is interested in diversity, that is on top of their stuff, but the reality is that these lists are inconsistent. They're showing the problems with readers, they're showing the problem with publishing, and they're just showing the problem with how these lists are cherry-picked, especially with the LGBT one, where it doesn't seem like there's any rhyme or reason really for why books were picked for that 135, why they weren't picked for that 135. and I saved the best for last. So let's get into the Centennial Picks. So when I saw this challenge announced, I was so fascinated by this. I thought it was interesting. As someone that's interested in reading books from different historical moments, from reading popular books throughout the years, like this interested me as a challenge. So the Centennial Picks is a achievement you collect once you've read one of these popular books from the last 100 years. This is created by Sharon, and the article goes, "Here at Goodreads World Headquarters, we like to occasionally step back from a really high altitude assessment of readers' favorite books. The idea behind today's collection: identify the most popular books published over the past 100 years as determined by Goodreads members' digital shelves. To do this, we traveled through the most popular books on Goodreads and sorted by publication date from 1925 to 2024. We picked out one title from at or near the top of each year. We didn't always grab the top book for a few reasons. Repeats for one, some eras are very Agatha Christie for instance. Other years had multiple good contenders for the top spot, and we resorted to metaphorical arm wrestling to determine which book made it. We're looking to curate a list that covers a wide range of topics, genres, authors, and ideas. You'll see several stone cold classics along with a few books you've probably read in your high school English reading class. Click around a bit and you'll find beloved children's books, famous fantasy worlds, scary as hell horror stories, pioneering historical fiction, literary science fiction, old school wooded Udits, and several international blockbusters. Also, if you're in the kind of mood, a good deal of existential dread and grim dystopian visions. Scan the list in chronological order to get a sense of the zeitgeist passing as told from the shelves of fellow readers. It is a fascinating collection. We've said it before and we'll say it again. Goodreads members are interesting, widely read, and devastatingly good-looking people. Click on the book's covers, images for more information about each title, and a use want to read button to add the books to your own aspirational shelves." Also, I should note that this was posted on April 1st. What they did is they picked the top book for each year based on current Goodreads members. So that is interesting to me because it means that a book that was popular in its era but has since fallen out of grace or since been forgotten by the time would not be on this list. But the reason I was interested in this is because I was going through trying to find my read, and I was very much anticipating the year 1997. And if you don't know, 1997 is the year that Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone or the Sorcerer's Stone was published. I was expecting it to be there, and it was not. And I was very shocked. J.K. Rowling is a TERF. I do not like her. I'm glad she's not here. But her book, that first one, has 10 million readers. I know it's the top book of that year. I'm shocked that it was not included because there is no book that could topple it in readership. For 1997, they went and picked Into Thin Air, which is not even the number 2 most popular book. That is the number 9 choice. And that book didn't even hit 1 million readers. And that's where I started to dig. I was so interested because whenever Goodreads picked a different title for this challenge, there is a big discrepancy in popularity. It's not like they're just picking the second choice, which has a very similar readership. When they pick the second choice, there's sometimes a very big gap between the first book and the second book, and a lot of times they're not picking the second book. They're picking like something way down the list. And I get it. There are a lot of rounds where they didn't want to repeat authors. There's rounds where they chose somebody and they're like, oh, now I can't choose it for this round. But there's also just a lot of odd choices. There are some repeats, but there also seems to be a choice to avoid authors with bad histories and to avoid a lot of children's literature. And there is seemingly a choice to pick literary, very beloved titles, even if they're not the most popular pick. Through my analysis, 28 of the 100 were actually the number 1 picks for Goodreads. So that's a little over 25% were actually the top book of whatever year they were from. So again, 25% of these books should have been a young adult or a children's book and weren't picked. On this list, there was only 6 books that were children's books. From my count, there were 14 authors that were not on this list at all that seem to have been skipped for controversy. So these authors kind of have a bad history and weren't picked because of those choices, even if they were the top pick. Like I said, there were 14, but the most notable ones, to me at least, were J.K. Rowling, Stephanie Meyer, and then Neil Gaiman. But through their process of not wanting to pick repeats, there were 26 authors that should have been picked that weren't because of repeats. And the biggest offender of being skipped over because he had multiple popular books was not Agatha Christie, as they kind of alluded to in the article. It was actually Stephen King, which is not surprising at all. And for the authors that did get repeated, that had 2 books on the list, we have James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, and Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I get it, those authors make sense to repeat. They're very beloved, very thought of as amazing literary authors, but it seems interesting that they were allowed to repeat. So why did Goodreads create this list? Why was this an idea pushed? There is kind of this appeal there to going and seeing what book was popular in the month you were born, to seeing what book was popular for a very historical year. There is a wide representation of different genres and different authors, and it's fun to look at. For me, at least, it like picked an itch. It was something interesting to me that I was interested in looking at. So that's why I was really fascinated when I started digging and realized that the books they picked were not the top choice. We're not even close to the top choices. There was one book picked that was not even published that year. Like, they made a mistake and picked the wrong year. I ended up picking The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, which was published in 2010, but the most popular book that year was actually Mockingjay, a part of the Hunger Games series. I get why that book wasn't picked, because it would have been a repeat, would have been one in a series, but Henrietta Lacks was still number 4. It wasn't number 1. The other interesting thing is that the closer we get to our time period, the more books were skipped over to pick a different book. And a lot of times, you know what they were skipping? They were skipping YA, and they were skipping genre picks. I don't know. That's interesting. It's creating this narrative of what is a popular book, of what is the most popular book, and it's not a true narrative. And like, I get why they're creating this image for us, but I think we have to look at it and admit that these are not the truth, that this is a curation. It is presented in a way to look a certain way to readers. It is a way to look literary. I just wanted to kind of put another 2 cents in here. So I really got on Goodreads' case in my last video because there wasn't enough curation in these lists for me, and that they were making really weird, deliberate choices with when they curated and when they didn't. And what's interesting about the Centennial Picks list to me is that they are very careful with what books they are picking, what books they are curating, and only seem to do it with this specific list because they had a very specific image in mind for what they wanted to portray with this list. And you're not seeing that curation in most of the other lists, any of the genre lists. So they're only doing it when it suits them to create this specific literary leaning image that they want us to kind of perceive with the most popular books of any given year, because that's what the list is said to be. That's not really what it is. There was a narrative that they wanted to create with this list that didn't fit with the actual data. And you know how I know this? Because I looked at Goodreads data. Goodreads actually has a breakdown of the most popular books based on year. It took a lot of digging to find these pages. And let me tell you, it's interesting to look at that data. It's even more interesting to see, oh, this is what we did. We just went willy-nilly and picked what we wanted to pick. I think this is the clearest example of them having this idea, having this image that they wanted to present, and creating that narrative, some of it based on data, but a lot of it based on what they wanted. And if it's happening in this list, it's happening in all the other lists as well. Goodreads and their greater company, Amazon, is trying to create this capital brand. It's trying to create this image for this brand. And in a lot of ways, it's probably the people working at this company that want to promote diversity, but there's also a more sinister edge to that, where it's, again, the brand wanting to market themselves as something that's very different than what the parent company is actually trying to promote and what the actions of the parent company is actually doing outside in the greater world. That's all to say, I'm not a journalist, I'm not a data analyst, but I had so much fun looking through this and analyzing and looking at the data and thinking about this greater thing of what Goodreads is trying to do, what Amazon is trying to do, and I probably will be back for the next round of Goodreads challenges because I can't keep away. I have to know what they're going to do next time, because I'm already looking at those lists, those articles, and I know which ones are going to be picked for next month. Stay tuned, because I will be back with more Goodreads stuff. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later, and happy reading!